Namaste, Dandavat Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master on Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 4, The Creation of the Fourth Order, Chapter 16, Text 10. Avyaktavartmaisha nigutakaryo Gambhira Vedha Upagupta Vita Ananta Mahatmya Gunaikadam Pṛthu Pracheta Eva Sampratatma. The reciters continued, no one will be able to understand the policies the king will follow. His activities will also be very confidential, and it will not be possible for anyone to know how he will make every activity successful. His treasury will always remain unknown to everyone. He will be the reservoir of unlimited glories and good qualities, and his position will be maintained and covered just as Varuna, the deity of the seas, is covered all around by water. Purport. There is a predominating deity for all the material elements, and Varuna, or Pracheta, is the predominating deity of the seas and oceans. From outward appearances, the seas and oceans are devoid of life, but a person acquainted with the sea knows that within the water exist many varieties of life. The king of that underwater kingdom is Varuna. Just as no one can understand what is going on beneath the sea, no one could understand what policy King Pṛthu was going to follow to make everything successful. Indeed, King Pṛthu's path of diplomacy was very grave. His success was made possible because he was a reservoir of unlimited glorified qualities. The word Upagupta Vita is very significant in this verse. It indicates that no one would know the extent of the riches King Pṛthu would confidentially keep. The idea is that not only the king, but everyone should keep his hard-earned money confidentially and secretly, so that in due course of time the money can be spent for good, practical purposes. In Kali Yuga, however, the king or government has no well-protected treasury, and only means of circulation is currency notes made of paper. Thus, in times of distress, the government artificially inflates the currency by simply printing papers, and this artificially raises the price of commodities, and the general condition of the citizens becomes very precarious. Thus, keeping one's money very secretly is an old practice, for we find this practice present even during the reign of Maharaj Pṛthu. Just as the king has the right to keep his treasury confidential and secret, the people should also keep their individual earnings a secret. There is no fault in such dealings. The main point is that everyone should be trained in the system of Varnashram Dharma so that the money is spent only for the good causes and nothing else. Text 11. Durhashado durvisaha asanopi viduravat naibhabi bhavitam shakyo vinhar anyuti tonala. King Pṛthu was born of the dead body of King Vina, as fire is produced from Arani wood. Thus King Pṛthu will always remain just like fire, and his enemies will not be able to approach him. Indeed, he will be unbearable to his enemies, for although staying very near him, they will never be able to approach him, but will have to remain as if far away. No one will be able to overcome the strength of King Pṛthu. Dandavat Pranamananda Krishna Prabhu. Purport. Arani wood is a kind of fuel used to ignite fire by friction. At the time of performing sacrifices, one can ignite a fire from Arani wood. Although born of his dead father, King Pṛthu would remain still just like fire. Just as fire is not easily approached, King Pṛthu would be unapproachable by his enemies, even though they would appear to be very near him. Text 12. Antarbahis bhutanam pasyam karmani charanai udasina ivadyaksho vayor atmeva dehinam. King Pṛthu will be able to see all the internal and external activities of every one of his citizens. Still, no one will be able to know his system of espionage, and he will himself remain neutral regarding all matters of glorification or vilification paid to him. He will be exactly like air, the life force within the body, which is exhibited internally and externally, but is always neutral to all affairs. Text 13. Nadandhyam dandayat yesha sutam atma dvisamapi dandhayat yatmajam api dandhyam dharma patestita. Since this king will always remain on the path of piety, he will be neutral to both his son and the son of his enemy. If the son of his enemy is not punishable, he will not punish him. But if his own son is punishable, he will immediately punish him. Purport. These are the characteristics of an impartial ruler. It is the duty of a ruler to punish the criminal and give protection to the innocent. King Pṛthu was so neutral that if his own son were punishable, he would not hesitate to punish him. On the other hand, if the son of his enemy were innocent, he would not engage in some intrigue in order to punish him. Text 14. Asya pratihatam chakram pridhor amana sachalat vartate bhagavan arko yavatapati goganai. Just as the sun god expands his shining rays up to the Arctic region without impedance, the influence of King Pṛthu will cover all tracts of land up to the Arctic region and will remain undisturbed as long as he lives. Dandavat Pranam Umadevi.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam.
Purport. Although the Arctic region is not visible to ordinary persons, the sun shines there without impediment. Just as no one can check the sunshine from spreading all over the universe, no one could check the influence and reign of King Pṛthu, which would remain undisturbed as long as he lived. The conclusion is that the sunshine and the sun god cannot be separated, nor could King Pṛthu and his ruling strength be separated. His rule over everyone would continue without disturbance. Thus, the king could not be separated from his ruling power. Text 15. Ranjayasyati yalokam ayam atma vichestitai atamum ahurajanam manoranjana kai praja. The king will please everyone by his practical activities, and all of his citizens will remain very satisfied. Because of this, the citizens will take great satisfaction in accepting him as their ruling king. 16. Dridha vrata satya sando brahmanyo vridha sevaka sharhanya sarva bhutanam manhado dina vatsala. The king will be firmly determined and always situated in truth. He will be a lover of the Brahminical culture and will render all service to old men and give shelter to all surrendered souls. Giving respect to all, he will always be merciful to the poor and innocent. Purport. The word Vridha Sevaka is very significant. Vridha means old men. There are two kinds of old men. One is old by age and another is old by knowledge. This Sanskrit word indicates that one can be older by the advancement of knowledge. King Pṛthu was very respectful to the Brahmanas and he protected them. He also protected persons advanced in age. Whatever the king would decide to do, no one would be able to stop. That is called Dridha Sankalpa or Dridha Vrata. Text 17. Matri bhakti parastrishu patnyam ardha ivatmana prajashu pitravat snigdha kinkaro brahmavadinam. The king will respect all women as if they were his own mother, and he will treat his own wife as the other half of his body. He will be just like an affectionate father to his citizens, and he will treat himself as the most obedient servant of the devotees, who always preach the glories of the Lord. Purport. A learned man treats all women, except his wife, as his mother, looks on others' property as garbage in the street, and treats others as he would treat his own self. These are the symptoms of a learned person as described by Chanakya Pandit. This would be the standard for education, or this should be the standard for education. Education does not mean having academic degrees only. One should execute what he has learned in his personal life. These learned characteristics were verily manifest in the life of King Pṛthu. Although he was the king, he treated himself as a servant of the Lord's devotees. According to Vedic etiquette, if a devotee came to a king's palace, the king would immediately offer his own seat to him. The word Brahmavadinam is very significant. Brahmavadi refers to the devotees of the Lord. Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are different terms for the Supreme Brahman, and the Supreme Brahman is Lord Krishna. This is accepted in Bhagavad Gita 10.12 by Arjuna. Param Brahma Param Dhamma. Thus the word Brahmavadinam refers to the devotees of the Lord. The state should always serve the devotees of the Lord, and the ideal state should conduct itself according to the instructions of the devotee. Because King Pṛthu followed this principle, he is highly praised. Text 18. Dehinam atma vatpresta Sridham nandi vardhana mukta sangha prashangoyam dandha panir asadhushu. The king will consider all embodied living entities as dear as his own self, and he will always be increasing the pleasures of his friends. He will immediately associate with liberated persons, and he will be a chastising hand to all impious persons. Purport. The word Dehinam refers to those who are embodied. The living entities are embodied in different forms, which number 8,400,000 species. All of these were treated by the king in the same way he would treat himself. In this age, however, so-called kings and presidents do not treat all other living entities as their own self. Most of them are meat eaters, and even though they may not be meat eaters and may pose themselves to be very religious and pious, they still allow cow slaughter within their state. Such sinful heads of state cannot actually be popular at any time. Another significant word in this verse is mukta sangha prasanga, which indicates that the king was always associating with liberated persons. Text 19. Ayam tu sakshat bhagavam stri adisha kutasta atma kalaya vatrina yasmin avidya rachitam nirhartakam pasyanti nanatvam api pratitam. This king is the master of the three worlds, and he is directly empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is without change, and he is an incarnation of the Supreme, known as Shakti Avesh Avatar. Being a liberated soul and completely learned, he sees all material varieties as meaningless because their basic principle is nescience. Purport. The reciters of these prayers are describing the transcendental qualities of Pṛthu Maharaj. These qualities are summarized in the words Sakshat Bhagavan. This indicates that Maharaj Pṛthu is directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead and therefore possesses unlimited good qualities. Being an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, This indicates that Maharaj Pṛthu is directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead and therefore possesses unlimited good qualities. Being an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Maharaj Pṛthu could not be equaled in his excellent qualities. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is fully equipped with 6 kinds of opulences, and King Pṛthu was also empowered in such a way that he could display these 6 opulences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in full. The word kutastha, meaning without change, is also very significant. There are 2 kinds of living entities, Nitya Mukta and Nitya Bhadha. And Nitya Mukta never forgets his own position as the eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who does not forget this position and knows that he is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord is Nitya Mukta. Such a Nitya Mukta living entity represents the Super Soul as his expansion. As stated in the Vedas, Nityo Nityanam. Thus, the Nitya Mukta living entity knows that he is an expansion of the Supreme Nitya, or the eternal Supreme Personality of Godhead. Being in such a position, he sees the material world with a different vision. The living entity who is Nitya Bhadha, or eternally conditioned, sees the material varieties as being actually different from one another. In this connection, we should remember that the embodiment of the conditioned soul is considered to be like a dress. One may dress in different ways, but a really learned man does not take dresses into consideration. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 5.18, Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmani Gavi Hastini Sunichaiva Svapakye Cha Pandita Samadarsan. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater, or an outcast. Thus, a learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress, and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of nescience, avidya rachitam. Being a Shaktivesh avatar empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Pṛthu Maharaj did not change his spiritual position, and consequently there is no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. And thus ends our reading for today. We'll continue from text 20 on Friday. Were there any comments or questions from the assembled devotees?
Pṛthu Maharaja Prabhu is Shaktavesh avatar.
Yes, that's what Bhagavatam is saying. Just like Srila Prabhupada himself, right? Srila Sridhara Maharaja told that Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, was a Shaktivesh avatar of Nityananda Prabhu, distributing mercy. So, yes, Shaktivesh avatars, always distributing mercy to everyone in the world. Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Guru Dev, Srila Acharya Dev, Srila Shanta Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai.
Jai.
Glories to the assembled devotees, Sama Bhaktiveda Vrinda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Nrsimhapuri Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Baladev Sripad Raju Ki Jai.
Jai.
Gangamai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Giri Govardhan Bhukti Govardhan Dham Ki Jai,
Jai.
Shabkun Radhakun Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Jai Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Scientific Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Gaura Premanandi Hari 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 Jai Shrimati Uma Devi Dasi Ki Jai. Jai Nanda Krishna Prabhu Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
श्रीपाद कृष्ण केशव प्रभु जी की जय।
Jai.
Gurudev.
Swagatika Biswal.
Yes, I'm not sure who this is. They haven't introduced themselves. Swagatika Bishwal, do you want to say anything? Okay. Dhanavad.